want people who go there to remember that they served and that they did make they were trailblazers for women in the military. And I really want to thank Change.org and the staff there for their extremely supportive role. And we have over 170,000 signatures. We have people from all over the world that support us. We have people from Europe writing, if these women had not served, we would probably be speaking German right now. So I want to thank everybody. I can't say thank you enough, all the people supporting us across the country. And my grandmother thanks you, and I thank you on behalf of all the WASP that are still here and those that are no longer here.
Well, thanks both of you for coming by. Like I said, we run a lot of campaigns, but especially outside the campaigns team, we don't get nearly enough exposure to a lot of the petition starters, and it's always really great to talk with folks about the campaigns they're working on and why it's so important, to them. So we're really glad you're here. As a little, actually, pretty much, we have to let you guys introduce yourselves. If you want to, Erin, if you want to say who you are, where you're from, and what this whole campaign is about.
My name is Erin Miller. I am from Silver Spring, Maryland. I grew up there, and then I went to college in California, and I lived in a bunch of other places, including other countries, but then I ended up back in Maryland to go to law school. And this campaign is about my grandmother, Elaine Harmon, who was a World War II Women Air Force Service pilot. And she was denied interment at Arlington Cemetery last year, so we started this petition with my sisters to try to reverse the policy of the United States Army and potentially amend the law which granted them veteran status in 1977.
So there you go. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask a few questions just in the beginning here, get things going, and then I'd love for you guys to chime in with any questions you guys have as well. So I guess just opening it up, Terry, growing up as Elaine's daughter, like what was she like? Like what were some of your fondest memories and in general?
Well, I'm Terry Harmon, daughter of Elaine Harmon, and growing up, I guess my mother raised us to be very independent and kind of adventuresome. One summer I remember she took me and my 3 siblings camping in a Buick sedan around the country for the summer for 2 months. No tents.
Oof.
She didn't want to fool with those.
Smart.
If it rained, we slept in the car, and my younger sister slept in the carrier on top of the car. So she didn't like to make things complicated, but she was a get to it and get it done type person. And as far as her, I always knew she had been a pilot in World War II, and occasionally one of these amazing women would stop by and visit, and there was always a sense of excitement to see a good friend again. And these women always seemed kind of special, especially her friends Maggie G. and Helen Cannon. And but other than that, we were a pretty typical family, and flying was just, we knew she had done it, but for me it was not something out there that I could pursue. Lessons were expensive, the careers were not really open to women in that area. And I remember in high school, one of my classmates was going to the Naval Academy, and I really wanted to do that, but it was not an option. And sometimes I wondered why my mother or my family wasn't the one that brought this attention to the world about, well, our taxpayer dollars are supporting these academies, why aren't women in them? But it wasn't an option. And later I traveled a lot with my mother to events when they were asked to speak as panel members or whatever. And I had never really understood why the WASP had gone home after World War II and let this rest without saying anything, not fighting it back then. But what I found out was, first of all, they loved to fly. They were honored to do what they did. And the war had ended, and I found out that they were actually ordered not to speak about this. So until their records were unclassified and they were able to speak, there wasn't too much opportunity, and they had just kind of spread to the wind and did not have an organization to follow up on what had originally been the intention of the military, to militarize them.
And for people who might not be familiar with the WASP program, can you summarize, like, what was it that your mom was engaged in and these other women were doing? What was
Well, as the war approached, the United States found themselves very short of military pilots, and they needed everyone that they could to travel overseas to be a combat pilot. And they conceived of the idea of the Women Air Force Service pilots in order to free up the domestic flying tasks that needed to be done. So the women were asked to come in and serve to handle those missions. And they included everything from training instructors, towing targets with live ammunition shot behind them, ferrying people from base to base, or whatever needed to be done, transporting cargo, and including top secret missions that included the pieces for the atom bomb. And so all the missions that the men would have flown had they not been able to come up with the women to do it for them. And they flew 60 million miles in their 2 years of service.
That's amazing. And so all this got classified, came into the 70s, still classified. I remember you telling me earlier, people celebrating the first women pilots, in the military, and then the WASP saying, like, actually, and
They've done that.
and so your mom got really active in going to Congress in the 70s, right, to get this fixed. So she was sort of on the front line of that. Do you remember that?
That's right. She was. I remember her sitting up for hours typing at the dining room table letters and using, the correction stuff, and working to lobby Congress. And they actually had an office. 2 people were instrumental in helping them get their legislation going. One was Colonel Bruce Arnold, who was the son of the commanding general of the Army Air Force back in World War II, and he wanted them to be militarized. So his son stepped up to, quote, fulfill his father's dream. And then Senator Barry Goldwater, who had flown with the WASP, was a big advocate. And they had they were given office space in Bruce Arnold's office. I think he was a lobbyist, maybe, I'm not sure, but I think he was a lobbyist, and he gave them office space. And my mother was a core part of that group that worked over a number of years to get attention, get the bill introduced and then passed, and whatever else was involved.
I'll tell you guys something very funny that I found. I found an old newsletter. They have a WASP newsletter from 1976-ish. And in it, they discuss how one of the WASP has a petition with over 20,000 signatures.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. And apparently there are several petitions. They just reference it, and then they're like, so-and-so,
wow.
Sarah so-and-so has this petition. If you want to talk to her about it, here's her address or something. And so like apparently they were petitioning people, so there you go. It's like the Change.org for women.
Long-term strategy.
I remember seeing that, and I also remember one of the WASP set up a table outside of, I'm not sure if how the time frames were, a Star Wars premiere out in California at a card table, sign my petition.
I'm nerdy enough to know that was 1977.
Yeah. So she was born just as they were getting their recognition. Prior to that, there was really nothing going on other than they were just getting together after World War II and starting to have a few reunions. But they were not being invited to events or being part of panels or air shows. All of this came with the passage of the Public Law 95-202 in 78, 79. And then it was nonstop right up until my mother passed away. She was always receiving 4 or 5 letters a week asking for autographs or sign a picture or something like that.
So,
Yeah.
and in 2009, they got the Congressional Gold Medal presented to them in the Oval
It was
Office.
Well, the
signed in
bill was
2009.
signed July 1st, 2009, and they invited my grandmother and 2 other WASP to come to the Oval Office to be at the signing. So she's in all those pictures. And then the actual medal was presented March 2010 at the Capitol. And the president didn't go to that, but a ton of Congress people went, and senators and stuff. So.
And so, as you mentioned, your mother passed away last spring.
Yes.
And her last wishes, she hand wrote her last wishes to be interned in Arlington.
Yes, I'm the executor of her estate, and she was very organized. I left a lot of information for us, but I had the instructions of, call right away because there's a waiting list, and this is what I want. And I had actually been to a number of funeral services with my mother at Arlington for WASP, including one WASP who, like my mother, was expecting to be admitted based on her own service, and that was Toby Felker in 2007 or 8. So, yeah.
But then, so she was denied though, and your mom was denied.
I was so thrown off because, like I said, I had been to services, and I didn't know what had happened, and first I thought, well, I'm glad my mother, I don't have to decide whether to tell my mother about this or not. And then my second thought was, I don't want to have to tell these other WASP that they've got to go through this fight to be recognized as veterans again. They're all in their 90s, or I think a few are 100, so I didn't want to have to be the one to bring it up, but it was important. It's important, given that they're in their 90s and depending on their plans, that their families be aware of this.
So then you got pretty super involved in this issue.
Yeah, so my mom was denied, and then we got Senator Mikulski involved, and then basically all that came out of that was we got a written letter explaining what they had already told my mom, and that was at the end of September. And then we kind of just milled on like what to do. And then around Veterans Day, I posted a picture on Facebook of my grandmother's ashes and said something like, my grandma's a veteran, but Arlington won't let her in, or something. So all these people started responding. And so then around that time, around Thanksgiving, one cousin and my sisters and I kind of all had a simultaneous idea to put a petition on Change.org. But I work for the government, so I made my sister do it. So, and she's super, like, she majored in women's studies. She worked at New York Civil Liberties Union, so she's all about, power to the people and stuff. So she right away, like, we drafted a petition together, and we posted it on Change.org, and then I started just going crazy on Twitter and Facebook, and I emailed it to everyone in my family, and I went around my neighborhood and told all my neighbors to sign it, and of course they all started sharing it, and then within 3 days we had 4,000 or 5,000 signatures, and then I started tweeting even more, which, by the way, I had not used Twitter before all of this, and now I feel like I'm an expert. Ben was like, do you have a PR background? And I said, no, I'm just a lawyer who learned how to use Twitter.
You should check her Twitter feed.
Yeah, so anyway, so I just started tweeting and whatever, and then Andrea McCarran, who works at Channel 9 here, contacted me on Twitter and said, do you live around here? Do you want to do a story? So I said, sure. So I think that day I went over and did a story with her. And then a few days later, the Associated Press contacted me, So we did a story with them, and of course after he published that, it like went to every paper in the country and all over the planet. So that was great. And then as soon as that happened, like all these TV shows and stuff started calling us, and Greta Van Susteren called us, and then so it was like maybe 3 days after the AP thing came out, we were supposed to be on Greta Van Susteren, and then the producer called me and was like, oh, we're like not going to have you on because Representative McSally's going to be on, and I was like, who's this lady taking our spot? But I was like, well, she must have something to say if she's going on about our issue. So then I went on Google and like Googled her like crazy, and I was like, oh, she looks interesting. I bet she thinks this is really like an interesting topic. So then she went on Greta Van Susteren, and of course we were watching because we were trying to figure out what was going to happen. And then she went on and was talking about how she wanted to introduce legislation, and these people were so important, and they're role models, and etc. So we were really excited to hear that. And then the next day we went to her office to thank her, and then ever since then we've kind of just been. And she's been working with us in Congress, and I've been like lobbying with Ben I've been going to offices. I've probably been to like 100 offices so far in the Senate and Congress. And then my Senator Mikulski introduced her bill like a week after McSally's bill, so we have a Senate bill also. And then I've just been going crazy on social media, and I've done interviews with like every major news thing ever, including overseas people.
And what's that been like? Like you haven't had a public, you haven't been a public, sort of face before this, like, and now you've.
Yeah, it's been weird, but at the same time, I'm very focused on what I'm trying to accomplish, so I'm not really thinking about it that much. I'm just looking at each day as what can I do today to accomplish our mission. So literally every day I think about things that I can do and what have I done today to advance what we're trying to get.
So I know, because I went with you to like 40 of them, it's like 8% of the Hill visits you've done. What has been maybe the most interesting or the most surprising thing about meeting with members of staff and members of Congress themselves when you talk about this issue?
One really, I don't know if it's surprising, but I'm happy about it, is that when I walk in and just say who I am and who my grandma was, they immediately are like, oh, okay, we will find someone for you to talk to. And I'm like, all right, I just throw my grandma's name around and show up. It's like, this is the easiest lobbying thing ever. And so usually people come out and talk to me, and then I have all, my material, and I just explain everything. And I think being an attorney helps because I can explain the specifics of the law and why the legislation would be helpful, and it's not just us being like, we need help us. It's like I have specific reasons why legislation needs to happen. And I mean, I had people within 5 minutes, their name was on the co-sponsor list, and when I walked in the office, they didn't even know what I was talking about. So it's like people are very supportive, and the petition is so helpful. Like Ben saw, when he pulls the petition out and I just pull my phone out and say, we have 170,000 people supporting us in every district, and I'm sure there's thousands in your district, they're just like, oh, okay, no problem. So it's been such a good tool, like really, really useful.
So if you could, actually, let me ask you, how has this experience been for you, seeing like all of these members of Congress coming out on this issue, and the big response that it's getting from the media? Like, yeah, what does that feel like?
It's wonderful. I'm not surprised because like I said, I traveled with my mother, and I know a lot of these WASP, and they have been, ever since they were recognized as veterans in the 70s, they have been treated just wonderfully, like they should be. And so I was counting on support from Congress, but I really didn't expect it to be as emotional or as passionate as it is for some of these women. Though in going to a lot of these events with my mother, I of course met a lot of today's combat pilots, and the WASP always love to meet them. It's kind of a mutual admiration society, so I've seen that somewhat, but you don't expect the support that you're seeing right now. I thought it would be a little more difficult and whatever, but it's been terrific.
That's great.